Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review episode 8 of Invasion. So, this episode does kind of have a theme of a lot of these characters starting to lose hope. Or a lot of people just deciding it's like, well, hey, maybe I can figure out a way to beat them or maybe communicate with them and see how that plays out. So, we have we have some kind of light things going on in here. Most of this episode is to really just be carried by dialogue. And I'm like, oh no, like this is a dialogue episode where I'm immediately just like, dude, we're like so close to the end and you're giving me a dialogue episode? Like I thought I would be getting like some action packed, like throttle to the pedal to the level kind of thing of like, hey man, like I should be like seeing some real aliens going and beating and killing and something, but I'm not. Like I'm just kind of seeing dialogue being happening here. I'm like, wow, this is exciting. It's like, cause so let's just say Anisha is to have a very interesting thing going on in this episode, where it seems like she is to be the prodigal daughter. I guess it seems like the way she's kind of being buttered up here, like nobody's business, is to really just like she's the chosen one for whatever reason. It seems like uh, we also have, let's just say it, we have Trevante and what is left of the UK kids mixing it up. So I'm like, yay! Like all I ever wanted is for them to just kind of mix up these stories, and I wanted them to obviously be connected. And but I don't know how we're ever gonna keep continuing all these connections with one another. But it's just kind of nice that we eventually have what I've been wanting is to get these these characters connected somehow or another. And so uh but it's also like weird because we have like a moment where Jasper and Camila or Jamila is going and like making their way to supposedly their homes to eventually just turn around and like go off to just figure out who is the person that they can meet with next, because they are needing to go somewhere, so to speak. I'll get more specific when we get into spoilers. So, so with that said, like Mitsuki, she's going on and putting together some like how can we connect to aliens in this episode. That's really what's going on here. The whole contact of this episode uh, really is to be coming from Itsuki, who is going and trying to figure out, crack the code of the aliens and trying to contact them somehow or another. So, with that said, let's go into more in depth about this episode. Uh, really, like there's some sad moments in this episode. Some real like for people that might need a tissue throughout this episode because maybe you're an easy crier. I don't know. Like because we just have these people all starting to lose hope. Like that one moment where Travante is kind of on the phone, just saying, "Hey, baby," like trying to just like have his moment here where he's on the phone, trying to somehow talk to his girl. In that moment, I'm just like, oh my god, this is so heartbreaking. Just because this guy is another like continent away, so to speak, and so there's nothing he can do. There's nowhere he can easily go. So with that said, like, and there's also some just heartbreaking moments, some tear jerking moments in this episode. I didn't cry, I wasn't very emotional, but I can understand, like, this episode is sad. So let's get into it. let's go out of our way to say this at double five time territory. And as per usual, I'm going to pick usually one person to go into spoiler time. Spoiler times. It's about the time I get to spoil this episode. So as per usual, I'm going to usually pick probably certain people at random and tell what their story is or where their story goes. It's kind of weird because two characters finally like connect with one another, and so it's going to be weird when I have to get to figuring out like who should I talk to, but or who should I talk like where should I go with this. But I think I can conveniently come up with like having like one easy transition, and so like I know that one thing ties into both stories, but I'm going to conveniently come up with a way to not have it connected. I'm just going to do that. That'll work. So let's go into it. Let's just go into the Anisha's family. And like it seems pretty easy for me to talk about them more so than anyone else's story. So let's go into it. So Anisha is to immediately go off and find this doctor who's to be David Barton, the same David Barton guy who was to before be the doctor where Anisha was to realize there was to be that one little alien thing inside of. And so he's like, oh my god, like, luckily you caught that, because if you didn't catch that, this guy would have died. Easily would have died. And so you saved him, that same guy. So David and Anisha are to just kind of talk about things, and so eventually we kind of have David who's buttering up Anisha like he desperately needs like something to eat from this woman. Like he's like, oh man, like you're so smart and you're so intelligent, you're such a doctor, and you're an important person, and we need a person like you. And but also David is to kind of slide in the fact it's like, well, yeah, like like I lost all my family, like I'm all on my own. And so like David is kind of putting it out there, he's kind of like he's laying it on thick that David is to say that like basically Anisha is like the golden child, and like she like can do no wrong, and we need important people right now, and we need anybody who has doctor kind of skill and people to improvise, because one fell swoop of an invasion between these alien like characters, and we might be out of like a ton of resources, only having band-aids and tourniquets, and like there isn't much for us to do. And so all of this is to eventually transpire or just eventually evolve into both Anisha and David locking lips and they're kissing, because David is to also see that Anisha isn't wearing her wedding ring. So he's like, well, you probably have given up something also. So Anisha, David kissing it all up in there, you know what I'm saying? So we have Ahmed trying to comfort his daughter, and so his daughter is kind of wondering where her brother and her mother is. And so Ahmed's like, oh, okay, well, let's go and try to find them. So Ahmed goes out there and is to talk to some random person by this cafeteria. And he is to ask, like, well, hey, have you seen a boy and a woman? And this person is just like, that could be a billion people. Like, be more specific. And so, really, they don't even try to, like, Ahmed doesn't even really try to, like, describe them all that well. He mentions that there is to be, of course, some boy and some woman that is to kind of look like them, which is to, I guess, mean skin tone, I'm assuming. So the one person is to say, it's like, well, the boy went down this hallway, and I don't know where the other two went, because evidently there was to be some man that Anisha was with. So Anisha was to be talking to her son, and because her son wasn't interested in eating any more of this food that was to be presented in front of him. And so she's like, well, okay, make your way to your father. And so Luke goes off to find this one other kid, and this one other kid decides, like, hey, man, do you want to see something cool? Something scary, but something cool. And so they go off to go to, I guess, this morgue part of this spot. And all of a sudden we end up seeing this kind of blackened alien looking human, where I guess once these aliens are to kill an alien, they just like have this kind of thing that gets covered all over them. And so all of a sudden Luke is looking at this body, and so when Anisha ends up coming back from lip locking it up with David, she eventually reconnects back with her family that is to be looking on as Luke is to be doing something with this body, maybe communicating with it. Excuse me, not quite sure. But that's how that story ends with the Anisha family, where they kind of reconnect, or they regather this family back together. And so Anisha is seeing Luke doing something with this body, and that's it for that story, really. So moving on. So let's go on to, of course, let's go with the Trevante story. So Trevante is with his, of course, that one family that was on the plane. Like, we're still there. So this ship, of course, this ship. Why do I always call a plane ship? This plane lands, and of course we have this family that it's like, hey, God's watching over you kind of thing. And so, like, he's watching over you. He is. So we got off this plane, and so we are now in UK. We're now in the United Kingdom, and I'm like, okay, so they're giving me this hint that something's happening here, something's going to happen. So I'm interested. So Trevante is now in the UK, and so he's talking to these military people, and he's like, hey, man, like, I'm a U.S. Navy SEAL, and, like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta make it to the USA. Like, come on, like, where's another plane? Where's another place? Where's another thing where I can get over to the United States? And the military operative that, of course, Trevante is talking to is like, dude, there is no way that you can get to the United States. Like, it's not going to happen for you. Like, we're not going to give you a plane. We're going to just have you just hope that you can go and find some boat somewhere and make your way across this country, because we're not going to give you a plane. We're not going to give you anything. If anything, we're going to give you a gun, which is just some, like, handgun, and just send you on your way. Like, goodbye. Like, sucks to be you. Like, evidently you don't realize the world is ending, and, like, nowhere is really to be safe. So, see you later. So, Trevante is to push on and just start driving through the UK somewhere. And so he starts to drive and then realize that he needs to go into a certain direction. And I would think that he would try to head to possibly the US Embassy to eventually try to get back to the US by maybe going through the US embassy. Maybe that's a possibility. Or maybe just to be able to contact anybody. I don't know. So Travante is to realize there's like a barricade or there's a bunch of like kind of vehicles where he is to head. So he gets out of his car and now he's forcibly going by foot to just try to get to the location that he's trying to go to. And it feels like everywhere he's to go, it's like there's just like destruction at his wake. So Travante does the only one thing that he can think of what to really do. And so he goes to this one telephone booth. Telephone booths? It's weird, but they luckily have them here, or at the place that Travante is at. So Travante is to go in this telephone booth, and he is to hope that this phone booth is working. And he's like, hey, it worked before, it should work now. Like, come on, work. So we have Travante, who is to, of course, go on and get this, I guess, message. And so we have Travante talking to his woman, I guess. And so we have Travante mentioning that like she's mad and she's scared and she's all kinds of things. Well, Travante is more scared. Like Travante's girl is more mad. So like, and she's mad at the fact that like they're like they can't like she can't be there with him right now, like dealing with all this, that they're apart. And she gets why they're apart, but still like it just makes her mad that she can't face all of this with him, and because the world's ending. Like in her mind, like the world is basically over now. Like there's nothing that they can do to like to fight this because like the aliens are too strong. Like there's nothing that can just go and take them down kind of thing. So we have Travante's wife, or I'm assuming wife, leaving this long stretch of a message mentioning that she loves Travante and she loves him, whoever him is, and I'm assuming it's their son. And so Travante is to also, after this long stretch of message that his lady is to be leaving, I want to maybe even try to like nicely, not just seeing his lady consistently. Uh, well, that sucked. Anyways, so let me know in the comments below what this girl's name was, if you know what it was. Maybe you are this actress. Maybe you can help me out very easily. So Travante, what am I gonna think, that I'm that popular that all of a sudden like actors and actresses are just desperately clinging on to my review? Like, oh man, I hope he liked what I said in episode 4. That would be hilarious. So Travante is to go on and like send this girl a message through the phone, and he's to mention that he loves him also, and that he's scared right now. There's no way for him to get to her, and he's in London, and like, yeah, the world is ending, and so he wants to just reimagine that he's there with her, and they're in the kitchen, and she's mad, and she's throwing stuff at him because she's mad, and like they're all just kind of going back to normal kind of thing, and the world isn't ending. And so like Travante is to kind of be doing this whole message, and he's crying, And so, really, Travante at this point has just kind of given up because there's nowhere to go. So, Travante just goes on and gets out of this phone booth after these whole long stretch of messages between one another. And he goes and sits on this phone booth, or sits like against this phone booth because there's nowhere to go. So now we have to put a pin on that story because it's going to continue on some other story. So let's now go on and let's go and talk about the Mitsuki story because I tend to leave the Mitsuki story usually for last because normally it's like the most complicated part of this episode, and plus like there's sometimes where like there's like a lot of like jargon that I just can't bother to try to go and decipher in all of this. And because it's all about just like, hey, I'm gonna say all these Whamadine like things, and hopefully you can understand what all it is, the whole science of it, and so on and so forth. So let's get into the Mitsuki part and then wrap it up with the Jasper Jamila story. It's kind of funny because like Jasper and Jamila didn't go off and try to see if any of the other kids were to like be okay where they are. Like nobody figured to go and do that, I guess. They're just like, "Hey man, we're all for ourselves now." Like it's either you're going to stay in your homes or you're going to just go and just like cuz cell phones are really a thing now cuz like we can't really have them do much of calling or whatever even though Travante really kind of just showed that technically the phone technically works. But anyways, so let's go with the Mitsuki story. How great is that? So Mitsuki is to go and be arrested, of course, because what happened in the last episode, her trying to do like forcibly that whole thing and she did it illegally. So she's now arrested, and so of course her boss is just kind of like stroll in and just be like, well, hey, like the United States people are here, kind of like 4-star generals or whatever, are now like coming here to try and like help us, and so like you need to kind of give them permission to kind of like work this whole signal and whichever you need to help them kind of figure this whole thing out. And so Mitsuki is just like, well, I will go and help them figure this out, but like they're going to need me to do it. Like they can't just handcuff me and tell me to just like break down how I did all this. Not gonna work that way. So what they end up trying to do is we have certain characters that are going and grabbing a mic and trying to say words like, can you respond into a microphone to see if these aliens will respond through this signal. And so we have, of course, Mitsuki, who is like not trying to communicate that to them through like a microphone or anything like that. Instead, she's going through this computer and trying to go on and talk to them through this computer and kind of like typing in words. And she's trying to decode their signal. And it seems that the signal consistently keeps on adjusting. And so Mitsuki can't get a really good lock on, of course, the ability to be able to talk to them easily because like the alien code keeps changing. So we have at one point where Mitsuki's coworker, who I think is Kato, is to go on and talk to her and mention it's like, well, hey, like you and me have kind of been really good like friends. Like, why is it that you like never told me that you were with Hinata? Like, why didn't you ever tell me? Like, you could have told me. And so the girl was like, well, like you don't own any piece of me. Like my mother, my father, Jasa, like they don't own a piece of me. And so like I don't feel like I need to tell anybody anything, kind of thing, is how like Mitsuki's kind of laying this out. And so Kato is to just turn around and just be well, hey, like it's not about like anybody having a piece of anybody. It's just like we're kind of like you and me are all that we have left, kind of thing. And so like that's all it really is just like you could have told the truth at any point in time, but I guess now Kato knows. So it's just like, well, there's not much to do here. So like we have the United States people trying to, through a translator, trying to figure out what's all going on. And so they're going and they're talking about like figuring out a comm system or communication system. And so it seems that Mitsuki is to go on and just start massively uploading a bunch of stuff that's tied to Hinata, like sending it to these aliens because she's just going to convert every single thing showcasing like people and earth and whatever to these aliens so they can understand that they aren't going to harm them, kind of thing. Or she's just kind of sending a bunch of pictures of Hinata to them because uh Mitsuki and her former boss were talking, and so Mitsuki is just like, well, I'm not going to try to give up the signal from uh, this spaceship because I don't want to immediately think that Hinata and all these other people are all dead. Like, I am not going to just give this up and assume that these people are dead and give up this signal. No. Like I'm still having hope that Hinata is still alive out there somewhere. And so I'm going to try and like hope and figure out that the aliens are keeping like their astronauts still alive. So really at the end of all this, at the end of this story, and we'll continue on to the very last like kind of part of this story here. All of a sudden, after kind of downloading all this information to these aliens, and Mitsuki's former boss is saying like, "Hey, stop the download," and Kato's like, "It's too late. She already sent it." So, and I know I'm kind of like I'm paraphrasing a lot. I'm maybe not getting to the exact point of this story because there's just a lot of science garbage that goes into here, and it's whatever. So, like, it's a lot of science signal stuff, whatever. And so, once that download is to be done, all of a sudden they start doing, the alien starts sending back a message of Waja, Waja, Waja. And so Mitsuki is to run to this microphone and is to say the word Hinata, and that's where the episode ends. But that doesn't end us with this review because I still have one more story to tell. So let's get to the Jasper and the Jamila story. Also, if you've gotten this far, uh, I'm kind of curious what favorite episode or what favorite story people have. Like, so what is your favorite story out of all this? Is probably what I'm really asking. It's like, do people love what I would call the UK kids story? Which, if you're from UK, then you're just gonna be like, oh well, like I like the kids on the bus story. Like that can be fine. I'm sorry if I offend anybody by saying it's the UK kid story because that's the easiest way to explain it. Uh, do people like the Travante story? Do people like the Anisha family story? Let me know in the comments below which story out of all these that you have been really enjoying. I'm assuming there's probably going to be a lot of people that probably say the Anisha story. That's the one I like the most, just because it seems like there's a lot of like twists and turns with that story compared to everyone else. Like we have like kind of the Mitsuki story that's just a lot of science garbin and whatever, and it's just like so. Not only do you have like you have the sciency part of the show, that's the part like you have to kind of sift through a lot of like subtitles through. I'm like, that's the worst kind of thing to have like a thing that you can't already understand already because it's the science part of it, and they turn around and now it's to be like harder to even understand on top of that because you now have a language barrier, which technically in this episode like we have a person that is to be a translator that is to say some of the stuff so we don't actually have to uh go in and read the whole thing because we're lazy motherfuckers. Because I know we are. We are. So, and I know there's some people. It's like, hey man, like I'm from XYZ thing, and I have to read a dialogue of the whole entire and like, yeah, I get it. Like, I wish there was a lot of stuff that was just dubbed over. In all honesty, like for everyone, so that way they can just easily all watch this show dubbed over and be easy for them. So, the last bit of this. So, let's go into it. So, Jasper in Jamila. Uh, I'm, yeah. So, that name, I tell you. So, no offense to the name department, whoever they are. So, Jasper goes on and is to take Jamila to see his mom. And I'm like, man, this relationship is kind of like, it's going really fast. They didn't even lock lips yet, but man, like this relationship is like, he's taking him to see the folks already. Like, all right, like really working, really like this relationship's going to get pretty far. So Jasper is to go and take Jamila to see his mother, and we horrifically find out that Jasper's mother is dead. And I'm like, oh my god, this is awful. Like, come on. Like, this kid, like, I think all he had was his mother, and, like, that's really all he has left is just his mother now is dead, sadly. So, Jasper is to just be, of course, mourning the loss of his mother. But then he eventually just turns around and is like, you know what? Like, I need to go to the hospital. Because, you know what? Like, I think in my seizures, like, I can either talk to the aliens or I can, like kind of, like, decipher something. And so Jasper is like, well, since they took my mother from me, I'm going to try and take them out. And Jamila's like, well, like, there's no easy way to kill these things. There's no easy way to take them out. And he's like, I'm going to figure out a way. Like, I'm going to figure something out. All I need to do is just have one more seizure that is to be like a consistent looping kind of a thing. And I'm going to have to go to this hospital to figure out how they can have me do that, and so that way I can go and try to figure out how to beat these aliens. And so I'm like, wait a minute, like, I don't know how I'm like, how I can just be okay with that, because we're having a kid having a seizure and he could possibly die from that, and he could possibly die like meaninglessly, and then there's like, he's not going to give any answers to anybody. And I don't know how I feel about that. I'm like, I wouldn't put this kid in that life of a risk. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't have this kid get so risky that he's like, I think a seizure could solve all our problems. I don't know about that. Maybe it could just end up having you dead, and like, no kid, like it seems like this kid can draw a bunch of stuff, and he even gets to the point where all of a sudden like some drawings are to say like, hey, this kid can tell the future. So because Jasper was to know that this invasion was going to happen before it actually happened. Like, Jasper was to have this seizure and realize that these aliens were coming, supposedly. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is getting somewhere. So Jasper and Jamila decide to just go off to go to this hospital where Jamila's mother is working, and to try and like figure this whole thing out. To just kind of figure if this kid has some kind of magical power of seizures, weirdly. That doesn't, like, no. No. It's a kid. No. So Jasper and Jamila are going off to just making their way through town. And so all of a sudden, they go into this bar of all places, and there's to be this military guy just leaning over this bar, and they're like, hey, you're a soldier, you can help us out, you can help us make it to the hospital, because we have your secret weapon right here to be like Jasper and his ability to see things. And so all of a sudden they're trying to wake up this soldier, and we find out that this soldier is Travante. And I'm like, yeah, like, connect the stories. Yeah, feel good because we're connecting the stories. So Travante is just like, dude, I ain't gonna do nothing. Like, I'm just gonna sit here and drink my woes, because where the heck else am I gonna go? And this kid is like, hey man, like, I've seen a ton of stuff. And Travante's like, really? Like, you've seen a bunch of stuff? Like, I've seen a bunch of stuff too, kid. You probably haven't seen half enough crap as what I've seen. And Jasper's like, no, like, I saw, like, the aliens before they were coming. I knew they were coming because of my seizures. And so, now they're forcing, of course, Travante to look through this notebook, and he's just like, okay, what is this? Like, oh, that's cute. Oh, like, what? But then all of a sudden, he used to have this one sketch where it shows, like, on his arm, the logo that is to be on this page, and it, like, shows that, like, it's getting destroyed, it's getting annihilated, and whatever. And so Travante's like, wait a minute, when did you draw this picture? And we, of course, have Jasper, who's to say, like, I drew this picture 4 days ago. And Travante's like, wow, okay, well, all right. Like, I believe you. Like, I'm not exactly 100% sober here, but, like, I believe you. So wherever you're saying that we need to go, we'll go there. And so I'll take you there. So yeah, like, we also had, like, the little kid that was taking Luke to this one body. This one kid was to mention that guns doesn't stop these aliens. Nothing really stops these aliens. So, but it's weird because Anisha was to supposedly kill one of these aliens. But I'm wondering if it wasn't actually Nisha all along, because technically her kids were in this vehicle. So I'm wondering if it's possibly that Jasper or Luke could possibly be the real weapon here to eventually killing these aliens. I wonder if they're the real secret weapon here that eventually some kind of contact between them kills them off. And I wonder if like that's the reason why these kids were chosen for some odd reason. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see like how this all breaks down, and hopefully I'm somewhat right about that, or maybe I'm completely off. I don't know, but we'll figure this out when we kind of play things out here. But yeah, we also had that one scene where the soldier was seeing this one video, and he was to be told not to tell anybody about this because he's kind of seeing like certain alien pieces and so on and so forth. And so we'll figure out what that actually all means later on. So yes, we'll see how everything plays out in another episode. We'll see how this season finishes up. We'll see if there's going to be a season 2 out of this. I'm assuming there is, because it seems like this show is fairly popular somehow or another. So we'll see how this all breaks down. I'm going to get out of here. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.